Tell your story.
Change the conversation.
Organized by students. TEDx Youth at SHC.
I want to talk to you all about something pretty personal to me. Who here's heard of long COVID? How about Lyme disease? What do they have in common? Both are autoimmune conditions. An autoimmune condition is the immune system attacking otherwise healthy systems within the body. This can happen for different reasons, leading to varying symptoms. But why am I going on about autoimmune diseases? After all, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a researcher. I don't have groundbreaking solutions to offer. But I'd like to tell a story that'll hopefully bring awareness to an overlooked condition and why it requires a paradigm shift in the medical field. It starts with a 10-year-old boy living his best life. He was an active kid involved in sports, music, chess, you name it. He did well in school, was happy, and was always open to trying new things. A few months after a common strep infection, he went on a ski trip with his family. On the last run of the day, he fell down a steep slope and went down the mountain head first. After being retrieved by ski patrol, he was diagnosed with a severe concussion. In the months following the accident, severe headaches and vertigo kept him in and out of school and his activities. His mood also began to change, an indicator of what was to come. Despite assurances from medical professionals that his symptoms would improve with time, everything got worse. Much worse. He had pain and felt like parts of his body were on fire. Food started to taste terrible, and some days he couldn't eat. He even stopped being able to read and write. Paranoia and anxiety came next, crippling his ability to function normally, so much so that leaving the house became a struggle. He believed his life was in danger, and the environment around him was contaminated. If you hadn't already figured it out, that kid in the story is me. This is me before. This is me when I was sick. I watched in fear from my hospital bed as my parents begged and pleaded with the doctors to help me. I bounced between medical professionals, hospitals, and tests in a seemingly endless cycle. The traumatic brain injury experts took one look at my symptoms and sent me over to the psychiatrists who, after their own analysis, sent me back where? You guessed it, back to the concussion specialists. I spent hours talking to psychiatrists who told me that my debilitating joint pain was imagined. My physical and psychological symptoms worsened, and soon I was trapped in my own frightening world, hardly accessible to the people who loved me most. This cycle carried on for what seemed like an eternity, and took a beastly toll on my family. Then, just as it seemed all hope was lost, a freak coincidence saved my life. One day, my psychiatrist sat down to skim through Outside magazine of all things. As he flipped through the pages, his eyes froze on an article. It was the story of a kid who had some autoimmune condition called pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric syndrome, or PANS for short. This kid's entire personality had changed after catching an infection, and the list of his symptoms was alarmingly similar to mine. At the time, there was no definitive test for PANS, but guidelines and the testing he ordered indicated that the little boy locked away in a hospital room, being treated for a concussion and losing himself, was actually physically sick, not mentally ill. Remember that strep infection I mentioned at the beginning of all of this? See, no one knew that it had remained simmering just beneath the surface, slowly turning my mind and body against me. The doctors postulate that the concussion exacerbated the situation by weakening the blood-brain barrier and allowing antibodies to get inside my brain and cause inflammation. Some researchers believe that as many as 1 in 200 kids suffer from PANS. That's 10 kids in a 2,000-person high school. Now, some of you might say that's not a lot of people. To you, I would say PANS is just one example of many misdiagnosed autoimmune diseases. Trust me, there are a lot. Or don't. Let's go over a few examples. Lyme disease is a tick-borne disease with a vast range of symptoms. One of its well-documented effects is its impact on the mood and mental state of the afflicted, as well as inflammatory physical symptoms. It's the cognitive symptoms that defy conventional explanation. Project Lyme says that as many as 40% of late-stage Lyme patients develop neurological disorders. How can a disease with a clear origin in the body impact someone's temperament? This takes me to my second example, long COVID. The Center for Disease Control says that up to 45% of COVID patients develop long-term symptoms, and the National Institute of Health says that as many as one-third of long-term COVID patients develop persistent neurological complications such as fatigue, brain fog, headaches, neuropsychiatric symptoms, and many more. There's an overall principle at work here. That post-infectious inflammation is the root cause of these neuropsychiatric symptoms. Conventional medical knowledge has treated illnesses of the body and mind as two separate things. As such, these illnesses are treated according to their perceived category. Most of the time, this can help. If you're depressed, here are some antidepressants. If you're bipolar, have some mood stabilizers. While these conditions are devastating, they can be categorized and treated as isolated illnesses of the brain. But this strategy falls short when a disease impacts both the body and the mind. This isn't meant to be critical of doctors, because think about it. How many of you would look at someone apparently suffering from mental illness and go, this kid might need antibiotics? Nevertheless, until we start treating the body and mind as a connected system, many people with autoimmune conditions will continue to suffer. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, as many as 30% of psychiatric cases do not respond to conventional treatments. Could it be that some of those people have a physiological basis for their behaviors? Why not ask that question? Through my advocacy work, I've met families with kids who have been misdiagnosed and mistreated. These kids end up living with chronic symptoms that prevent them from going about their normal lives. Others get bounced from one institution to another, unable to live at home because of the care they require. And sadly, some have taken their own lives to end their suffering. I was extremely fortunate to live near one of the few clinics that treats PANS, have such determined parents, and that one of my doctors happened to read that article. What if I'd been born in another state, or to parents unable to take the time out of their busy lives to drive me to treatment? These freak strokes of luck kept me from going the way of countless PANS patients, some of whom I know personally. With awareness and earlier intervention, PANS is treatable. I began my care not far away from here, at Stanford, through treatments targeted at addressing both the underlying infection and the inflammation in my body. Not only did the physical symptoms go away, but the physiological ones as well. I gradually entered remission. It was not all smooth, though. It was a slow, difficult process that tested my and my family's resolve every step of the way. It came in bouts with seemingly miraculous periods of remission that'd be interrupted by long, demoralizing relapses. These relapses would leave us questioning if it would ever be possible to escape the world of illness we were living in. But as treatment progressed, I was slowly able to return to some semblance of who I was before getting sick. I returned to school, picked music back up as a drummer this time, and resumed some of my old sports. Since exposure to bacteria can still cause minor versions of these relapses, I still check in with my doctors from Stanford every once in a while. I will never be able to return to the life I had before the condition, but I can get pretty close. And I would argue I learned more than a few life lessons along the way. I stand before you as healed as I can be. I'm an A student, well, mostly, drum in the school rock band, and play on my high school's football and lacrosse teams. I also work on advocacy for various PANS-affiliated organizations. On top of speaking with the patients as a mentor and friend to help them through their recovery, I also speak to parents as living, breathing proof that their children can get better. I've also fundraised for the clinic where I was treated as a patient ambassador. Finally, I have participated as part of a multi-organization delegation to Washington, D.C. to speak to legislators about awareness, federal research, and the need for more insurance coverage for PANS and other conditions. Try saying that 10 times fast. I'd be in DC right now, but I had this talk to give and a prom to attend. I have good friends, and I love my family. I'm truly blessed. I want to give hope to others who are suffering, create awareness, and help expedite the paradigm shift in the treatment of autoimmune diseases like PANS. So, when a kid shows up at the doctor's office, suddenly complaining of new extreme anxiety of some kind, is it worth asking if they've recently been sick? Is it possible that they need treatment for infection or inflammation? I'm here to tell you that it most certainly is. I hope that with this new understanding, if this happens to you or someone you love, you are armed with enough knowledge to ask the question yourself. This is where the change can begin. Thank you.